Eli Grant never imagined he would stand inside the grand banquet hall of the Zayari Empire's flagship. The chamber stretched wider than any human-built stadium, its ceilings glowing with pale crystal lights that shimmered like distant stars. Strange banners written in alien script hung from tall pillars, and soldiers in shimmering armor lined the walls. For a young engineer from Earth, this was both exciting and terrifying. Eli had been chosen as part of a small human delegation to visit the Zayari, one of the most advanced civilizations humanity had ever met. He was not a soldier or a diplomat, just a systems engineer who understood alien technology better than most. He suspected he had been invited simply to demonstrate goodwill. Still, being here felt overwhelming. Everywhere he looked, towering aliens moved with perfect posture. The Zayari were tall, almost regal in appearance, their skin ranging from pale, silver to deep blue. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting light in ways that made them seem mysterious and untouchable. They wore ceremonial armor polished to a mirror shine, the kind that looked more like artwork than battlefield gear. Eli tugged at his plain jacket and tried to act invisible. He had been told not to embarrass Earth's delegation. Standing here, among alien generals and nobles, he felt small and out of place. His job was to observe quietly, not to draw attention. Then he noticed her. At the far end of the hall, seated near the Emperor himself, was Princess Lizera. She was younger than most of the Zayari leaders, her posture straighter than steel, but her eyes wandering as if her mind was elsewhere. She wore ceremonial armor too, though hers was decorated with delicate patterns of starlight and flowing silver ribbons. But despite all that grandeur, Eli could see it. She looked uncomfortable. Her shoulders stiffened under the weight of the armor, and she shifted in her seat as though trying to breathe more easily. She glanced around the hall, not with the commanding gaze of a royal, but with the searching look of someone who longed to be anywhere else. Eli almost smiled. He recognized that feeling well. When the banquet began, platters of glowing fruit and crystal pitchers of blue liquid were served. Eli kept to himself, trying to taste what he could without looking rude. The food was strange but not unpleasant, though the drinks tingled oddly on his tongue. Halfway through the evening, the Emperor rose to speak. His voice echoed like thunder, praising unity and strength, welcoming the human guests as partners in the endless stars. Everyone applauded with a rhythm unfamiliar to Eli, sharp claps that rang like bells. As the ceremony continued, Eli found himself near the edge of the hall, sipping cautiously from a tall glass. He didn't belong in the center of attention anyway. That was for admirals and ambassadors. But then Princess Lizera drifted away from the royal table. To Eli's shock, she walked toward the quieter edge of the hall, toward him. She moved with grace, her silver ribbons trailing softly behind her. But when she reached him, she let out the smallest sigh, as though finally escaping the weight of formality. "You are one of the humans," she said, her voice calm but curious. Eli straightened, awkwardly. Yes, Princess, Eli Grant. I'm just an engineer, nothing important." Her glowing eyes studied him carefully. "You do not wear armor, you do not carry a blade, yet you stand among warriors without fear. That is unusual." Eli scratched the back of his neck. "Honestly, I'm terrified. I'm just trying not to embarrass my people." For the first time, Lizera smiled. It was a small, genuine smile, not the polite mask she had worn earlier. "That makes two of us," she admitted, softly. Eli blinked. "You? But you're the princess." "Yes," she said almost bitterly. "The princess. A symbol, a figure, but not myself. Not tonight." She tugged slightly at the heavy armor plates across her chest. "This is tradition. It is beauty, they say, but it is heavy, and it is not me." Eli glanced at her armor, then down at his own jacket. It was an old earth jacket, simple, comfortable, with a faint stain on the sleeve he had never managed to wash out. Before he could think, he said the first thing that came to mind. "Well, if you want comfort, you should try this instead. Way better than all that metal." It was meant as a joke. a nervous, harmless joke to make her smile. He half expected her to frown or have him escorted away for being disrespectful, but Lysera tilted her head, curious. "This fabric you wear, it is light." "Yeah," Eli said quickly, trying to cover his nerves. "It's just a jacket, nothing special." To his horror, Lysera extended her hand. "Then let me see." The nearby guards stiffened. A few nobles whispered. Eli froze, but under the princess's calm gaze, he reluctantly shrugged off his jacket and handed it to her. She examined it as though it were a rare treasure, brushing her fingers over the worn seams. Then, without hesitation, she slipped it around her shoulders. The jacket looked small on her tall frame, but it fit well enough. The hall went silent. Soldiers stared. Nobles whispered louder. And then Lysera smiled again. Brighter this time, genuine and unrestrained. "It is warm," she said. "Soft. I like it." Eli stammered. "It was just a joke, princess. You don't really have to." But she shook her head, clutching the jacket as though it were armor of its own kind. "I will keep it. Tonight I will wear this instead of ceremony. Let them see that even a princess may choose what brings her peace." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Some nobles looked outraged, others stunned. The emperor himself raised an eyebrow, but he did not interrupt. Eli stood frozen, unsure if he had just committed the biggest mistake of his life. Yet when Lysera turned to him with that smile, he felt something shift. In that moment, she was not a distant royal or an untouchable figure. She was simply a person, grateful for a small act of kindness. The banquet continued, but the whispers never faded. Everywhere she walked, the alien princess wore a human's jacket instead of her regal armor. To her, it was freedom. To everyone else, it was a mystery. And to Eli, it was the start of something he could not yet understand. The days following the banquet were unlike anything Eli had expected. He thought the jacket moment would be forgotten quickly, brushed aside as a small curiosity. But he was wrong. Everywhere he went on the Zayari flagship, whispers followed. Guards who had once ignored him now glanced his way, then muttered to one another in their musical, echoing language. Nobles stared at him openly. Some looked angry, others amused. Eli could never quite tell what they were thinking, and at the eyes, center of all those whispers was Princess Lysera. From the very next morning, she appeared in the halls of the flagship still wearing his jacket. Not once, not as a polite gesture, but as if it belonged to her. During training drills with soldiers, she wore it instead of the formal cape of her station. During tours of the ship, while explaining technology to foreign guests, the jacket was still there. Even during small ceremonies where Zayari officers bowed to her, she kept the human fabric wrapped around her shoulders. It was almost surreal to Eli. He couldn't walk across a corridor without catching sight of that familiar piece of clothing, and every time his stomach turned with worry. Had he insulted her culture by accident? Would he be punished for putting the princess in such a strange position? But Lysera never looked troubled. If anything, she looked freer. One afternoon, Eli was called to inspect an energy system deep inside the ship. He crouched near glowing conduits, running his scanner across alien circuits. As he worked, soft footsteps echoed behind him. "You are working again, Engineer Grant," Lysera's calm voice said. Eli jumped, almost dropping his scanner. "Princess, I didn't hear you coming." Lysera tilted her head, smiling faintly. The jacket hung loosely around her frame. The sleeves rolled up slightly where they were too short. "Your people's clothing is very convenient," she said simply. "It does not restrict movement. I can breathe. I can walk without the constant weight of metal plates." Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm glad you like it, Princess, but don't you think people are talking? I mean, you're royalty. Wearing some human's old jacket might not be proper." She crouched beside him, her glowing eyes thoughtful. "Do you know what it means when someone of my station accepts a gift?" Eli froze. "I don't think I do." "In our traditions," Lysera explained, Gifts are not given lightly. To accept one is to honor the giver. To wear it is to show respect, not shame. She touched the edge of the jacket with her fingers, as though it were more valuable than gold. You may have spoken in jest, but I chose to accept it. That makes it mine and makes you honored in return. Eli's eyes widened. Wait, you mean, this is serious? She nodded. To you it was a joke. To me it is a promise. A small one, perhaps, but still a bond. Eli sat back, stunned. He had thought it was nothing, just a nervous attempt at humor. But to her people it carried weight he had never imagined. Lysera seemed to sense his panic and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. Do not fear. I am not offended. In truth, I am grateful. Grateful? For what? For being treated as a person, she said softly. Not as a symbol, not as a title, not as a... You spoke to me without ceremony, without the heavy weight of expectation. That is rare for me, Eli Grant. Hearing his name in her voice made him pause. For the first time, he truly realized she wasn't simply the princess. She was someone who longed to breathe freely, someone burdened by traditions she hadn't chosen. Still, the whispers continued to grow. During one evening meal with the delegation, Eli overheard two Zayari nobles at a nearby table. It is shameful, one muttered. Our princess drapes herself in a human's rag instead of her ancestral garb. Or perhaps, the other replied more cautiously, she is making a statement. Perhaps she sees something in the humans worth respecting. Eli tried to focus on his food, but he couldn't block out the words. He never wanted to cause trouble, yet now his jacket had become a subject of debate across the Empire's highest ranks. The tension grew sharper during an inspection trip to one of the outer colonies. Eli traveled with the delegation to observe energy systems there, while Lysera accompanied them as a royal overseer. The colony was rougher than the flagship, its towers built from stone and alloy rather than glowing crystal. The air was dry, the sun harsh. Eli could see the weariness in the colonists' faces. A gathering of locals formed, listening as Lysera addressed them. She stood tall, her jacket blowing lightly in the dusty wind. One colonist, bolder than the rest, stepped forward. His voice carried bitterness. Why does the princess wear the clothes of a stranger? Is our empire's glory not enough? Does she hide behind humans now? The crowd murmured. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted nervously. Eli's chest tightened. He wanted to step in to defend her, but he knew speaking out would only make things worse. All he could do was watch. Lysera did not flinch. She raised her voice so all could hear. This is not hiding, she declared. This is not shame. This jacket is proof of choice. It reminds me that even as a princess, I am still a person who can choose kindness, comfort, and truth. It reminds me that strength is not only in armor but also in friendship. The crowd fell silent. Her words rang with sincerity, carrying across the dusty square. Slowly, some of the colonists bowed, not out of fear but out of respect. Eli stood in awe. What had begun as a nervous joke now carried meaning far beyond him. To Lysera, the jacket was more than fabric. It was a symbol of freedom. To the people, it was becoming a statement. That their princess valued honesty over empty ceremony. Later, when the delegation returned to the ship, Eli walked beside her quietly. You didn't have to defend it like that, he said softly. She glanced at him with calm eyes. I did, because it is not just fabric. It is a reminder that even the smallest act can matter, and I will not let anyone take that away. Eli said nothing more. Deep down, though, he realized something important. His careless gesture had sparked a change he couldn't control. The princess of an empire had chosen to wear his jacket every day, and now the entire galaxy was beginning to take notice. And somewhere in his heart he wondered if maybe, just maybe, that was only the beginning. The whispers had grown into something larger. At first, people only found it strange that the princess of the Zayari Empire wore a human's jacket, but as weeks passed, the simple act began to divide opinions. Some nobles claimed it was an insult to tradition. They muttered that the princess was mocking her own people by favoring a foreigner's gift. Others, however, saw it differently. To them, it was a sign that Lysera was open to change, that she valued friendship over stiff ceremony. Eli Grant never wanted to be in the middle of such debate, yet somehow he was. Wherever he walked on the flagship, he felt the eyes of Zairi, officers on him. Some looked curious, others cold. He told himself it didn't matter, he was just an engineer. His role was to study technology, help where he could, and avoid drawing attention. But every time he saw Princess Lysera striding through the halls in his jacket, he knew the situation was far beyond his control. The tension became clear during their next mission. The Emperor ordered a delegation, including Lysera, several generals, and a few humans like Eli, to travel to a frontier world on the edge of the Empire. This colony had been restless for years, struggling with harsh conditions and strict rule. Rumors of rebellion had begun to surface. The journey was long, and Eli spent much of it buried in work. He studied the colony's energy systems, reviewing data and sketching improvements on his tablet. It was a way to distract himself from the growing storm of politics swirling around him. When they finally arrived, the atmosphere was tense. The colony was nothing like the shining core worlds. Its cities were rough, built from stone and steel, their towers plain and functional. The people looked worn, their clothes dusty, their faces lined with hardship. A crowd gathered as the princess stepped forward to speak with the local leaders. The soldiers stood ready, their armor gleaming even in the pale sun. And once again, Lysera wore the human jacket. Eli stayed back half-hidden among the engineers, watching closely. The governor of the colony, a stern Zayari with sharp silver eyes, bowed stiffly. "Princess," he said, "we welcome you to our humble world. But I must speak honestly. The people are unhappy. They feel forgotten by the Empire. Supplies are thin, and the rules are harsh." Murmurs rose from the gathered colonists. Some nodded. Others shouted words Eli couldn't fully understand, though their anger was clear. Lysera listened without interruption. She stood calmly, her hands resting at her sides, the jacket's fabric stirring in the wind. Then one colonist, bold man with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward. His voice was sharp. "And what does our princess know of hardship? You wear a human's rag instead of the robes of your people. Do you mock us, or do you plan to trade our future for the favor of outsiders?" The crowd stirred. Some shouted in agreement. Others looked uncertain. Soldiers tensed, their hands on their weapons, but Lysera lifted a hand, keeping them still. She stepped closer to the scarred man, her voice calm but firm. "This is not a rag," she said. "This jacket is not weakness. It is a reminder that I am not only a title or a symbol, but also a person who can choose." She touched the fabric gently. "I choose to remember that true strength is not only in armor or in fear, but in kindness, in friendship, in trust." The man narrowed his eyes. "Words are easy, princess, but we live with hunger. We live with rules written by those who never walk our streets." Lysera's gaze softened. "Then perhaps it is time those who rule listen more closely." She turned, addressing the whole crowd. "I will not pretend your struggles are simple. I will not stand here wrapped in ceremony while you suffer. That is why I wear this, because it reminds me to never forget who I am speaking to. People, not just subjects. Families, not just numbers. Lives that matter." The murmurs shifted. Some colonists lowered their heads, moved by her words. Others still looked doubtful, but the anger in their voices faded. Eli watched in silence, his chest tight. He had seen politicians give speeches before, full of empty promises, but Lysera's voice carried something different, something real. And when she touched the edge of the jacket again, he realized the truth. She wasn't only wearing it for comfort. She was wearing it as a symbol, a message. That night, back on the ship, Eli found himself summoned to Lysera's private chambers. He entered nervously, unsure what to expect. The room was elegant but not extravagant. Soft crystal lights glowed from the walls and intricate patterns lined the floor. Lysera stood near the window, staring at the stars beyond. The jacket was still around her shoulders. "You defended it again today," Eli said quietly. She turned, her glowing eyes steady. "I did not defend the jacket. I defended what it means." Eli frowned. "And what does it mean to you, Princess?" She was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. "It means I am not alone. That even across the stars there are those who see me not as a crown but as a person. It gives me strength. It reminds me I have the power to choose who I am." Eli felt a lump in his throat. He had never meant for his jacket to carry such weight. It was old, worn, practically useless. Yet, to her it was everything she had been searching for, a symbol of freedom in a life bound by duty. Lysera stepped closer, her expression serious. "But others see it differently. To them it is dangerous. They think I favor humans above my own people. They fear change." Eli swallowed. "And the rebels?" She nodded slowly. "They see it as weakness. They believe it makes me soft. Today was only the beginning. They will test me. They will test us all." Eli glanced at the window, the stars beyond. He had never wanted to be part of politics or rebellion, but now, because of one simple joke, he was tied to a princess, a people, and a conflict far larger than himself. Still, when he looked back at Lysera, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away. The following days confirmed Lysera's warning. Reports came in of unrest in the colonies. Groups calling themselves the Free Voices had begun to organize, demanding independence from the Empire. Some of their messages spoke directly of the princess, mocking her choice to wear a human's rag as proof she had lost the Empire's strength. When Eli overheard these reports, his stomach twisted. "They're using it against you," he said to Lysera. She only shook her head. "Let them. Symbols can be twisted, yes, but they can also be reclaimed. If they call it weakness, I will show them it is strength." Her calm confidence unsettled him, but also inspired him. One evening, as Eli walked through the quieter halls of the ship, he overheard two Zayari officers whispering. "The rebels are gaining ground. If the princess continues like this, she will lose support among the nobles. Perhaps, but perhaps she will win support among the people. That is more dangerous still." Eli kept walking, his thoughts heavy. He knew now that the jacket was no longer just clothing. It was a flag in a storm, carried by a princess who refused to let it fall. And though he had never meant to start any of this, Eli understood one thing. The galaxy was watching, and so was he. The tension that had been building finally reached its breaking point. The delegation was still stationed near the frontier world when the attack came. It was sudden, swift, and carefully planned. The rebels, who called themselves the Free Voices, had decided to make their move. Their goal was simple: to shatter the peace talks by striking at the Empire's leaders. The Zayari fleet had been preparing for something like this, but even so, the rebels managed to launch a surprise assault. Sirens wailed across the colony outpost, red lights flashing in the corridors. The sound of distant explosions rattled through the walls. Eli Grant was in one of the smaller outpost buildings when the alarms began. He had been checking the colony's power system when the floor shuddered under his feet. Sparks flew from the ceiling as he grabbed his tools. A soldier burst into the room. "Human, stay low. The rebels are here." Eli's heart pounded. He wasn't trained for combat. He was just an engineer, but now he was trapped in the middle of an attack. Meanwhile, Princess Lysera stood at the command station, listening to reports pouring in from every corner of the colony. Rebel ships were attacking supply depots, communication towers, and defensive posts. Their forces were not as advanced as the Empire's, but they were determined, striking fast before reinforcements could arrive. "Princess, we must withdraw you to safety," one of her generals urged. "The rebels will target you directly if they know you are here." Lysera shook her head. "No, if I hide, they win. If I run, they prove I am weak. I will lead, not retreat." The general hesitated, but Lysera's voice carried authority beyond question. "Gather the defense teams, we will push them back, and find Eli Grant. He is not trained for battle. He will need protection. Eli, however, was already caught in the middle of the fight. Rebel forces had breached the outpost. He crouched behind a broken console, listening to the sharp hiss of alien weapons outside the door. His hands shook as he tried to think. He had no weapon, no armor, just his toolkit. Then, above the chaos, he heard a familiar voice. Eli, he peeked out and saw her, Princess Lysera, striding through the smoke with soldiers at her side. And there it was again. His jacket, wrapped around her shoulders, now marked with dust and scorch marks from the battle. For Eli, the sight was unreal. She looked like no ordinary princess now. She looked like a commander, her presence steady and fearless even as explosions echoed around them. She reached him quickly, pulling him up. "Are you hurt?" No, Eli stammered, his voice shaking. "But this place isn't safe." "Then stay close to me," she said firmly. "You are under my protection." Eli wanted to argue. After all, she was the princess and he was nobody. But the determination in her voice left no room for doubt. The battle raged on. Rebel fighters pushed hard, hoping to break the defenders. The outpost walls shook under fire. Eli stayed close to Lysera, following her as she directed soldiers and civilians alike. She didn't just command. She fought alongside them, her movements sharp and precise. At one point, a blast rocked the ground, knocking Eli off his feet. Before he could rise, Lysera was there, standing over him, shielding him with her armored frame. The edge of her ceremonial plating sparked as another shot struck, but she didn't move. When the smoke cleared, Eli looked up at her in disbelief. You didn't have to." Her eyes softened, though her voice remained steady. "I will not leave you behind." The rebels pressed harder, sensing an opportunity. They mocked the princess, their voices carrying through the comm system. "Look at her," one rebel shouted. "She hides behind a human's rag. She is no leader, no warrior." The words were meant to shake morale. Some of the Zayari soldiers wavered, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But Lysera stood tall, adjusting the jacket on her shoulders. "This is not weakness," she shouted back across the comms, her voice echoing through the channels. "This is strength. This is proof that even the smallest bond can unite us against fear. You call it a rag, then see how it leads us to victory." Her soldiers roared. In response, their courage rekindled. They charged forward, rallying around her. For them, the jacket was no longer a joke or an oddity. It was a banner, a symbol. Eli watched in awe. He had never seen anything like it. His old worn jacket once, nothing but a simple piece of clothing, was now inspiring an entire army. The battle stretched on, fierce and chaotic. Eli did what he could, repairing damaged systems, helping soldiers restore power to defenses. He wasn't a fighter, but he could keep shields running, doors locked, and communication lines alive. Lysera noticed, giving him nods of approval as they worked side by side. But as the hours dragged on, the rebels unleashed their most desperate strike. A massive explosion tore through the main power hub, plunging the outpost into darkness. Without shields, the defenders would fall. Eli knew what he had to do. "I can fix it," he said quickly. "But I'll need time." Lysera placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you shall have it. I will hold the line." With soldiers guarding him, Eli rushed to the damaged hub. Sparks flew as he tore into the circuits, his hands moving faster than they ever had before. Every second mattered. The sound of weapons fire and shouts echoed behind him, but he forced himself to focus. Finally, with a final spark and a deep hum, the power roared back to life. Shields flared around the outpost once more, pushing the rebels back. Cheers rose from the defenders. By dawn, the rebels had retreated. The outpost stood, battered but unbroken. Soldiers celebrated, exhausted but victorious. Lysera stood at the center of it all, her jacket torn and scorched, but still wrapped firmly around her shoulders. To her people, she was no longer just a distant princess. She was the leader who fought with them, who bled with them, who stood with a human at her side and turned a joke into a symbol of hope. Eli leaned against a wall, too tired to move. When Lysera approached him, he managed a weak smile. "I thought I was going to die 100 times tonight," she smiled back, gentle despite her exhaustion. "But you lived, and you helped us win." He glanced at the jacket. "That poor thing is ruined now. I don't think it can survive another battle." Lysera straightened the torn fabric with care. "It will survive as long as I wear it. It is no longer just yours, Eli Grant. It belongs to all who fought today." Her words sank deep into his heart. For the first time, he truly understood. The jacket was no longer a joke. It was a promise. And as the soldiers cheered around them, Eli realized something even greater. This was only the beginning of a change that would shake the Empire to its core. The colony outpost still bore the scars of the battle. Walls were scorched, the air smelled faintly of smoke, and the ground outside was pitted from blasts. But despite all the damage, there was a new energy among the people. They had fought, together. Soldiers, colonists, even strangers from distant Earth. And at the center of it all was Princess Lysera. Everywhere she walked, heads turned, not because of her royal title, but because of the way she had stood with them during the darkest hours. Soldiers saluted her with pride, and colonists bowed with respect that came not from fear but from gratitude. She had earned their trust. The jacket, though torn and singed, was still draped around her shoulders. Its once plain fabric had become a symbol far stronger than any ceremonial robe. People whispered about it as though it were a banner of hope. For Eli Grant, the human engineer who had given it to her as a joke, this was almost too much to believe. He had never meant for any of this to happen. Yet somehow his old jacket had changed the course of events for two civilizations. In the days following the battle, peace talks resumed. This time things were different. The rebel leaders had seen what Lysera had done. They had seen her fight not as a distant royal but as someone willing to share danger with her people. When messages reached them about the victory at the outpost, many began to soften their demands. They still wanted better conditions, but they were willing to listen. The emperor himself was cautious at first. He had heard the reports and seen the way people were rallying to his daughter. Some nobles whispered that her actions were reckless, that she had risked too much. But others argued that she had inspired loyalty stronger than any law could command. At last, the emperor allowed Lysera to lead the new negotiations, with Eli at her side as a representative of humanity. The meeting hall was filled with tension. On one side sat Zayari generals and nobles. On the other, the rebel envoys, their faces stern but watchful. And between them stood Lysera, calm and steady, the jacket still on her shoulders. She began with simple words. "We cannot change the past, but we can shape the future. I have seen your struggle, I have walked your streets, I will not pretend everything can be solved in one day. But I promise you this. We will listen. We will rebuild together, not as rulers and subjects, but as partners." The rebels muttered among themselves. One stood and pointed at her jacket. "And what of that symbol? Do you mean to say you value the words of outsiders more than your own blood?" Lysera's eyes did not waver. "This jacket is not weakness, it is not betrayal. It is a reminder that even the smallest gift, freely given, can carry meaning beyond measure. It is proof that unity is possible, between people, between worlds, between all who are willing to trust." She placed a hand over the fabric. "This is not about humans or Zayari. It is about choosing a path where no one must suffer in silence. I choose that path, and I ask you to choose it with me." Silence filled the hall. The words were not grand or complex, but they carried weight. Slowly, one by one, the rebel envoys nodded. For the first time, hope truly took root. That evening, after the long talks ended with agreements for reform, Eli and Lysera stood together on a quiet balcony overlooking the stars. "You did it," Eli said softly. "You changed everything." Lysera shook her head gently. "No, we did it. I could not have spoken as I did without you. Without this." She touched the jacket again, smoothing its scorched edges. Eli gave a nervous laugh. Honestly, I can't believe you're still wearing it. It's falling apart. You should have real clothes, ones worthy of a princess. But Lysera smiled, her glowing eyes warm. Do you not see? This is not just cloth anymore. It is memory. It is promise. It belongs not only to me, but to all who believe in what we began. Eli shook his head in disbelief. It was just a joke, and yet it became truth, she finished softly. The following weeks brought change. Supply routes to the colonies were improved. Harsh rules were softened. The Empire began listening more closely to its people. None of it was perfect, but it was progress. And everywhere, stories spread of the princess who wore a human's jacket as a symbol of unity. Eli found himself more involved than he had ever expected. Instead of just fixing machines, he was asked to sit in councils, to share ideas, to explain how humans manage cooperation between nations back on Earth. At first, he felt unworthy, but Lysera reminded him that sometimes the smallest voice could matter most. For Lysera, life also changed. She was no longer seen only as a figure of tradition. People now called her the People's Princess. The nobles were cautious, but they could not deny the loyalty she inspired, and still every day she wore the jacket. One night, as the two of them walked through the quiet gardens of the flagship, Eli finally gathered the courage to speak. You know, he said. I should probably ask for that jacket back. It's been months now. Technically, it's still mine. Lysera stopped walking, turning to face him. Her expression was calm, but her smile held warmth. No, Eli Grant, she said softly. It is not yours anymore. It belongs to us, to our people, to our future. Eli tried to laugh, but the words struck something deep inside him. For the first time, he realized just how much one simple act, a nervous joke at a banquet, had changed everything. Not only had it given the princess freedom, it had built a bridge between two civilizations. The stars stretched endlessly before them, bright and infinite. Eli looked at them with new eyes. He was still an engineer, still a simple man, but now he was also part of something far greater. And beside him stood Lysera, no longer just a princess, but a leader ready to guide her people into a new age. Together, they gazed out at the universe. The future was uncertain. Yes, challenges would come again. But with trust, with courage, with one shared symbol of hope wrapped around her shoulders, they knew they could face whatever lay ahead. For in the end, what began as a joke had become something far stronger. It had become the start of a shared future.